Seeing that the RF 100 to 300 f2.8 has been out for a while now, this is giving us great opportunity to test it on multiple locations and give you some great feedback.
Yeah, so over the last month or so, we've used this lens quite a lot actually. Multiple shoots, multiple locations, pretty much testing it in kind of everything that we do, which was kind of cool. Look, amazing lens, no two ways around it. Very unique lens, and we'd like to tell you guys all about it.
Now, before this lens was launched, there wasn't any sort of soft-spoken words about it or any rumors that we know of or that we could see online. It was sort of Canon's sort of best-kept secret. And the 100 to 300 is an interesting range, as we do have 70 to 200 2.8s already. But this is quite an interesting lens. It's obviously more focused at the mid to top end zoom with a constant f2.8.
Yeah, and it is quite a unique lens in its setup as well. So a couple of years ago, Sigma did a 120 to 300 f2.8 lens. It was one of their first kind of sport line of lenses. Nikon does a 120 to 300 f2.8 as well, but that is for DSLR mount, so in their AFS line. And then many years ago, Canon did an EF 100 to 300, but that was like a f5.6 if I remember correctly. So it's not a unheard of focal range, but right now, as it stands, it is unique. Nobody else does a lens like this for a mirrorless mount.
Now, the advancements with mirrorless bodies and the autofocus system will allow you to use this with both the 1.4 and also the 2 times extenders. And like you said, we did some shots outside, we did some shots specifically today indoors to test out, to see sort of the 2.8 low light capabilities of this bad boy.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to talk about the low light capabilities of this lens, I think it's a good place to start. It's a 2.8, so it's good. It is absolutely perfectly good as an indoor sports lens. So I mean, anything that you can think of, in our case, go-karting, because, you know, in Cape Town right now, it's kind of tricky to find anything indoor sport related. But think like track cycling indoors, you know, like that's like the first thing that springs to mind to me. You know, even like I have some friends who shoot like martial arts tournaments, you know, and this kind of thing would be perfect because in a lot of those scenarios, you can't be like right next to the ring or the, you know, the floor space that they're partaking on. And something like this could be perfect because it does give you that variance. And that makes it so much more usable than like a 400 2.8 or a 600 f4 or whatever else you can think of. And just that little bit of range over the 200, you know, on your 70 to 200. And again, that kind of makes it unique and kind of cool.
So while we show you some beautiful images of this lens, let's chat about some quick specs.
Yeah.
You have up to 6 stop stabilization when you're using a mirrorless camera with IBIS in it. You have the usual buttons on this lens. You've got your 1, 2, 3 image stabilization modes, autofocus, manual focus. You can limit your focus distance, of course. And then you've got these preset modes, which you can assign, obviously, with the custom buttons in the front. And with all RF lenses, you have your control ring at the top as well. They also coat this lens white just to get some heat resistance in there, just to make sure that the optics perform consistently the same if you're shooting on a very hot summer day.
Yeah, and then just in terms of the optical elements inside of it, so this lens has 1 fluorite element, 2 UD elements, and 1 GMO glass molded optic element. Actually, it is a spherical element inside of it. And at the end of the day, that's a whole bunch of stuff that just means that your images are going to come out crispy.
Very nice.
All the crispy out of this thing. It is super sharp.
Now for interest sake, this is the first big lens I've seen with a pinch lens cap. It's 112mm, so yeah, good luck finding polarizers or UVs for that. With any L lens this kind of caliber, it is weather sealed, and it also has a 1.8 meter focus distance, minimum focus distance, and it weighs 2.59 kilograms.
Yeah, and that sounds like quite a heavy lens, but I don't know about you, I actually didn't mind the weight. I find it quite nicely balanced, especially when you have a decent sized body on it. Now, for a lot of what we shot, pretty much all the images you're going to see is coming out of an R6 Mark II. And yeah, not the biggest camera, not the heaviest camera out there, but in terms of the balance that this thing gives you, I actually really like it. When you're in that natural position where you have your hand on the zoom rocker, which is kind of how you'd be shooting, that's pretty much perfect. I had no issues with it at all. In one of the shoots that I did, was shooting some racing in Neisner, and literally spent an entire day carting this lens up and down a hill, and like no issues at all. It sounds heavy, but it's so well balanced, and really not that bad at all.
Now this also features the dual nano USM autofocus motor, which we tested today quite nicely in low light with the go-karts, and it was tracking extremely well in low light. We were using both the vehicle tracking and human face detection, and it was working perfectly.
It locks on, it sticks, and yes, a lot of that is down to the cameras that we use. We know Canon has really good autofocus performance, but it's always nice to see a lens that keeps up with that. The other side that you need to mention there is that you are also looking at a lens that can keep up with the speed of your current mirrorless setups. So in these units, your aperture diaphragm has to close and open continuously when you do focus and do exposure in between shots. So when you're running at 30 frames per second burst on these lenses, the lens needs to be able to keep up with the body, kind of not the other way around. And this unit will do that absolutely effortlessly. It is designed for that. It is designed to be used at absolute maximum speed of what these cameras are capable of, and it just goes. No issues.
So when you think about high-end image quality, these big lenses always comes to mind, and there's generally never complaints. I mean, shooting in low light today, obviously we were using the camera at extremely high ISOs. Some of these shots were even taken at 12,800 ISO just to get the sort of non-motion blur effect. And even then, image quality, perfect. Sharpness is great. I know you were shooting more in daylight scenarios with the racing.
Yeah, so, I mean, yes, the image quality is excellent. Just broad spectrum, and that's exactly what you expect. You are spending a ton of money on a lens. No two ways around it. It has to deliver. These kind of super telephoto, big wide lenses are always that little bit of a step above, and this lens is no exception. So firstly, the sharpness that you get out of it is absolutely incredible. Edge to edge, no complaints whatsoever. It maintains extremely well. The detail pickup and the rendering that comes through this lens is absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, we weren't shooting on a sort of a high megapixel monster here, It's R6 Mark II, so it's nothing crazy. And the quality, the clarity, and that pixel definition that you get out of it is incredible. And I mean, it's what you expect. It's what you want out of this thing.
So in these top-end big zoom lenses, with all these fancy elements and coatings applied, the color needs to be perfect. And we definitely think so. I mean, you were shooting in the day with us most of the time, where you can test sort of the contrast and see the punch of the color, and it definitely pops.
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's no surprise. And like we keep saying that, it's no surprise this, it's no surprise that. But it really is no surprise that a lens like this delivers the goods when it comes to that color rendition. And yes, of course, it's a Canon lens going onto a Canon body. You are expecting that Canon color science to be working perfectly together. And it does. It just works. Your colors pop, your contrast is there. It's accurate. It's what you see. It's exactly what you want it to be. And if that is kind of its niche to fill, and be that ultimate lens that with a teleconverter on, you can use it for literally anything from shooting indoor sports to wildlife and rugby games and whatever else you can possibly think of, then yeah, it is just that good. Yeah, it's expensive. It's very expensive, but it's good. Now, we've said a lot of positive things about this lens, and there is one phrase that we've used multiple times during this review. We said that it is quite expensive, and there's no two ways around it. Yes, this is an expensive lens. It's a lot of lens, but it's an expensive lens. And that always leads to the question, is it worth the money? That's a very, very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, and you can probably say, is a Ferrari worth the money? The feeling you get of getting in the Ferrari, shooting at 300mm f2.8, is that worth it? Snapping on a 2x converter, shooting at 600mm f5.6, is that worth it? Having that flexible zoom range, is that worth it? And I think it is. I think it is worth it.